We are in a time where we really must act now for human rights. Our human rights are under assault at every level through institutions and individuals who do not have our best interests at heart. And it's on us to create the conditions to enforce our rights in the world today, for ourselves, for our children, and for our communities.
This system of ours is a failure. And there's a man standing behind me that I want you to meet because he represents the failure of this system. His name is Frankie Carrillo, and he spent 20 years in California's prisons for a murder he did not commit. Say hello to Frankie Carrillo.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for being here today. You know, I was wrongfully convicted when I was 16 years old of a murder I did not commit, and I spent 20 years of my life in prison until I was able to finally prove my innocence. So I experienced this injustice firsthand, and to be here today to lend my voice to those who don't have a voice because they've been stripped away from it brings me a lot of joy to hear today.
Torture is no longer verboten. Torture is part of the United States of America, and that cannot be acceptable to us. My friend Juan Mendez, with whom I worked many years at Human Rights Watch, is now the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Torture. Juan Mendez says that 15 days of solitary confinement results in scientifically and medically recognized changes in an individual human being. 15 days of solitary confinement. We are putting people in this state in solitary for 15 years, for 20 years, for 28 years. We're for 2 years, for any years. We are sinking beneath the tide of ugliness that has been heaped upon us as a people, while those in power would have us believe that they are trying to protect our rights by doing the egregious and ugly things they're doing. What Juan Mendez says is solitary confinement is torture. Recognize that solitary confinement is torture and do away with solitary confinement.
My name is Ron. I'm a parent of a young man that's in Pelican Bay State Prison, so I'm out here to support the Solidarity hunger strike objection that we're going through here. We just want to go ahead and speak out in regards to the men and that are at Pelican Bay State Prison and other state prisons that are trying to go ahead and receive some sort of compassion for their life. We understand they're there for reasons of whatever the judicial system has put them there for, but at the same time, they do deserve to be treated as human beings.
It's a commitment that we have to our brothers that we left behind in prisons. You know, I myself was in prison, and I understand the conditions that people go through solitary confinement. It's total isolation from any human being. So you never get to hug your loved one. In some situations, you don't even get to see your loved ones in visiting. They're kept incommunicado. They're restricted to many things, such as food, such as magazines, information, even letters. They're constant supervision, but they're also deprived of sleep. Many of them are psychological tortured. Many of them are there indefinitely. And the human rights has said that after 15 days in these conditions, you know, it's considered torture. You have brothers in there that have been there for 40 years and under those conditions. You know, you have individuals that most of them have a medium sentence of 20 years in solitary confinement. And these brothers are sometimes just named by somebody that's being debriefed to get out of that isolation. You know, when we find that some of them seek a way out through suicide, and that's really has become common now in solitary confinement.
There are people who would insist that these people deserve to have the treatment that they are getting. They deserve it because they are the worst of the worst. Well, let me tell you something about the worst of the worst. There was a man named Jesus who said it was not the worst of the worst, it was the least among us. Then what did he say about the least among us? He said, the way you treat the least among us is the way you treat me. Now for those people, and I hear a lot about these people who believe this is a Christian nation, or people who are, the majority of our citizens are Christians. If that's the case, then where are you? Where are the Christians who are demanding, that the least among us be treated as human beings? That the least among us be treated as worthy of the attention of the rest of us.
First demand is to stop group punishment, and that's where, and to hold individual accountability, because literally they can lock down a whole race if somebody from that race group did something. So to stop the group punishment, the second demand is to abolish the debriefing process. And this debriefing process, what it entails is other prisoners making statements to earn their way out of SHU. So they make statements against other prisoners so that they can get out. So here one week they're the worst of the worst, most dangerous, and then the next week, as long as they make statements that don't necessarily need to be corroborated with any actual evidence, then they earn their way out. So, and then the third one is to adhere to the suggestions, to the recommendations of the 2006 report on safety and abuse in America's prisons. This report was conducted in 2006 with numerous recommendations about our overall prison system in America. It did define that solitary confinement was being broadly overused, and that this type of housing was not only endangering the prisoners, but it was also endangering family members, community, and society as a whole. The fourth recommendation, the fourth demand, is nutritious and adequate food. Many times their food trays, the servings are missing, the actual allotted serving is missing, or else if the tray's wet from going through the cleaner, that wets the food and it ruins it. And so they are asking for nutritious and adequate food. And the fifth demand is to be able to, for educational programs and things like that.
This should be the nation that people look up to, because it is a beacon of hope, and instead we have become the merchants of death. We cannot accept that. God bless you for being here.
We've endured water hoses, we've endured church bombings and church burnings and homes being burned, we've endured lynchings. We can overcome this.
It took me to go to prison to sit down and reevaluate my life, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. For me to even have an understanding that life is greater than just being on Adam's Boulevard.